Screams echoed through the marble halls of the Vitiello estate, but they didn't come from a torture chamber. They came from a 5-year-old boy. Lucas Vitiello, the most feared man in the city, stood over his son, his face twisted in a mixture of rage and heartbreak. The boy, Leo, lay on the floor, thrashing in silence, his eyes wide with a terror he couldn't vocalize. "He's broken," Lucas shouted, his voice cracking. "Take him out of my sight." The guards moved in, but a petite figure in a maid's uniform stepped between the barrel of a gun and the child. She didn't flinch. She simply reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a jagged, dirty object that would change the course of the Vitiello Empire forever. It wasn't a weapon. It was the truth. The rusty spoon was the kind of diner where the coffee tasted like battery acid and the pancakes were mostly grease. For Santiago, it was a lifeline. At 24, she had too many bills, a crumbling apartment, and a past she was trying to outrun. She balanced 3 plates on her left arm, navigating the narrow aisle between sticky tables, her mind focused on the tip jar that was currently depressing her with its emptiness. It was a Tuesday night, usually dead quiet until the black SUVs pulled up. The atmosphere in the diner shifted instantly. The regular patrons, truckers and insomniacs, stopped chewing. The air grew heavy, charged with an electric tension that made the hair on Santiago's arms stand up. The door chimed, a cheerful sound that felt mocking as 4 men in dark, tailored suits walked in. They fanned out, securing the perimeter with practiced efficiency. Then, the center of gravity entered, Lucas Vitiello. Even Santiago, who avoided the news, knew the face. He was sharp angles and cold eyes, a man who allegedly owned half the city's politicians and all of its docks. But tonight, the Godfather didn't look like a kingpin. He looked like an exhausted, furious father. Dragging behind him was a small boy, no older than 5. The child, Leo, was dressed in a miniature suit that cost more than Santiago made in a year. But his face was red and blotchy. He was pulling against Lucas's grip, his mouth open in a silent wail. "Sit," Lucas commanded, shoving the boy into a booth near the window. The boy didn't react to the word. He just kept clawing at his own ears, his eyes darting around the room frantically. "I said sit, Leo!" Lucas slammed his hand on the table. The cutlery rattled. The diner went deathly silent. The boy, oblivious to the sound of the slam, saw the vibration of the silverware. He squeezed his eyes shut and began to rock back and forth, hitting the side of his head with his small fist. "He's doing it again," one of the bodyguards, a man named Lucas, muttered. "Boss, maybe we should take him back to the nanny." "The nanny quit this morning," Lucas snapped, loosening his tie. "Everyone quits. He's impossible. He's defective." Santiago watched from behind the counter. She shouldn't get involved. The Vitiello family was dangerous. One wrong look could get you disappeared. But she watched the boy, Leo. She saw the way his eyes tracked the flickering neon sign outside, the way he flinched when the heavy door slammed shut, not because of the noise, but because of the air pressure change. She grabbed a glass of water and a menu. "I'll take this table," she told her manager, who was currently hiding in the kitchen. Santiago walked over. The bodyguard stepped forward, hands drifting toward their jackets. Lucas waved them off, his eyes fixed on his son with a look of utter defeat. "Coffee." "Black," Lucas said without looking up. "And bring him, I don't know, ice cream. Anything to make him stop shaking." Santiago set the water down. She didn't look at Lucas. She looked at Leo. The boy was hyperventilating. He was terrified of the unknown environment. Santiago knelt. She was now at eye level with the child. Lucas frowned. "What are you doing?" "Get up." Santiago ignored the Mafia boss. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, red laser pointer she used to entertain her stray cat. She shone the red dot on the table in front of Leo. Leo stopped rocking, his eyes locked onto the light. Santiago moved the dot slowly, tracing a circle. Leo's hand reached out, trying to catch it. She moved it to the menu. He followed. She moved it to the glass of water. He followed. Then, Santiago tapped the table twice to get his attention. When Leo looked at her face, she didn't speak. She raised her hand to her chin, palm open, and pulled it down. "Thank you." Then she made a fist and rubbed it in a circle on her chest. "Sorry." Leo's eyes widened. He mimicked the motion on his chest. "Sorry." Lucas froze. His coffee cup was halfway to his mouth. What did he just do?" Santiago stood up, smoothing her apron. "He said he's sorry, sir. He's not defective. He's just overstimulated. The lights in here are buzzing. Bad ballast. You can't hear it, but he can feel the frequency. It hurts him." Lucas looked at her, really looked at her. For the first time, he saw a tired waitress with frayed cuffs, but eyes that held a strange, fierce intelligence. "You know sign language?" "My younger brother was deaf," Santiago lied smoothly. It was a partial lie. She had learned it in a foster home years ago, a survival mechanism to communicate with a non-verbal child she protected. "Your son isn't being difficult. He's trying to tell you the vibration hurts. He's sensitive. Doctors told me he has cognitive delays, that he's unteachable." Lucas's voice was low, dangerous. "Doctors can be wrong," Santiago said, pouring his coffee. "Especially if they don't know how to listen to someone who can't speak." Leo had stopped crying. He was watching Santiago, a look of awe on his face. He pointed to the ice cream on the menu picture. Santiago nodded and signed ice cream. Leo clumsily signed it back. Lucas stared at his son. For 5 years, he had never seen the boy communicate a specific desire other than through screaming. "What is your name?" Lucas asked. "Santiago." "Santiago." Lucas reached into his jacket pocket. Santiago braced herself for a gun. Instead, he pulled out a business card made of heavy black cardstock with gold embossing. "I need a nanny. The last one left in tears because Leo bit her. You made him calm in 30 seconds. "I have a job," Santiago said, gesturing to the diner. "I'll pay you 5,000 a week," Lucas said flatly. Santiago choked on air. That was more than she made in 4 months. I'm not a nanny. I'm a waitress. And now you're a private caregiver. Live-in, health insurance, and protection. Lucas's eyes narrowed. "You look like someone who could use a little protection, Santiago." He had seen the bruise on her wrist, peeking out from her long sleeve, the mark left by her landlord when she was late on rent last week. Santiago looked at Leo. The boy reached out and touched her hand, his fingers small and cold. He looked lonely, a profound, deep loneliness that Santiago recognized in her own reflection. "When do I start?" she whispered. "Pack your bags," Lucas said, standing up. "We leave now." The Vitiello estate was less of a home and more of a fortress disguised as a museum. Iron gates, security cameras that tracked every movement, and silence. So much silence. Santiago was given a room in the east wing, next to Leo's nursery. It was bigger than her entire apartment. But as she walked through the hallways the next morning, she realized the luxury was a veneer. The house was cold. There were no family photos, no toys in the living room. It was sterile. She found Leo in the playroom, which was really just an empty room with soft walls and a few foam blocks. He was sitting in the corner, staring at the wall. "Hey," Santiago signed, tapping the floor so the vibration would alert him. Leo turned. When he saw her, his face lit up, a genuine smile that transformed him from a problem child into a beautiful little boy. For the first week, things were difficult but progressing. Santiago taught Leo basic signs: hungry, thirsty, hurt, play. Lucas was rarely home, consumed by a brewing war with the Rossi crime family. But Santiago quickly learned that the danger wasn't just outside the gates, it was inside. On her fourth day, the front doors blew open. Clicking heels echoed on the marble. Enter Vanessa. Vanessa stood tall, blonde, and impeccably dressed in Chanel. She was Lucas's fiancée, a union arranged to merge two powerful territories. She was beautiful, sharp, and looked at Santiago as if she were a roach on a wedding cake. "So," Vanessa drawled, walking into the playroom without taking off her sunglasses. "You're the new keeper for the animal." Santiago stiffened, placing a protective hand on Leo's shoulder. Leo shrank back, trembling. He was terrified of her. "His name is Leo," Santiago said, keeping her voice steady. Vanessa laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Lucas wastes so much money on this thing. He's broken, darling. A genetic dead end. If it were up to me, he'd be in an institution where he belongs, out of sight, out of mind." She walked over to Leo, looming over him. Leo whimpered. "Stop it," Vanessa hissed at the child. "You're embarrassing." She reached out and pinched his arm, hard. Leo screamed, a high-pitched, deafening sound. Santiago didn't think. She slapped Vanessa's hand away. The room went still. Vanessa stared at her hand, then at Santiago, her eyes widening in disbelief. "Did you just touch me?" "You hurt him," Santiago said, her heart hammering against her ribs. "I am the future mistress of this house." Vanessa stepped closer, her perfume cloying and overpowering. "You are hired help, a glorified waitress Lucas picked up from the gutter. Do not forget your place. Once I have a ring on this finger and a real son in my belly, this little defect will be gone. And so will you." She turned on her heel and stormed out. Santiago checked Leo's arm. There was a red welt forming. Rage, hot and unfamiliar, bubbled up in Santiago's chest. She realized then that Leo's behavioral issues weren't just frustration. They were fear. Someone had been hurting him, and he had no voice to tell his father. That night, when Lucas came home, Santiago met him in the study. "We need to talk," she said. Lucas looked up from a stack of ledgers. He looked exhausted, the shadows under his eyes deep purple. "Is he acting up? Did he bite you?" "No," Santiago said. "He's learning. He knows 20 words now. But, sir, he's afraid of Vanessa." Lucas sighed, rubbing his temples. "Vanessa is not maternal. She's difficult. But she's necessary for the family business. She'll adjust." "She called him an animal," Santiago said, stepping closer to the desk. "She pinched him." Lucas's head snapped up. "She what?" "She pinched him because he was scared. Sir, Leo isn't the problem. The environment is the problem." Lucas stood up, walking to the window. "I can't break the engagement, Santiago. Not now. The city is a powder keg. If I insult her family, we go to war. Leo has to toughen up. He is 5, Santiago argued. "He is a vitiello," Lucas roared, spinning around. "In this world, weakness gets you killed. If he can't hear the enemy coming, he is a liability to himself. I am trying to keep him alive." "Then let me help him," Santiago pleaded. "Let me teach him. Really teach him. Not just signs. Let me take him out of this house, to a park, to a library. Let him see the world." Lucas hesitated. He looked at the woman who challenged him without fear. "1 week," he said softly. "You have 1 week to show me progress. If he's still like this, then Vanessa is right. Maybe a boarding school in Switzerland is better for him?" Santiago nodded. 1 week. She had 1 week to save a boy from exile. The week was a blur. Santiago took Leo to the park, shielding him from loud noises, but letting him feel the vibration of the subway trains under his feet. He loved it. He laughed, a sound Lucas hadn't heard in years. But Santiago noticed something strange. One afternoon, in the music room that nobody used, Santiago sat at the grand piano. She didn't play well, just simple scales. Leo was on the floor, coloring. When she hit a low C, Leo stopped coloring. He turned his head. Santiago hit the note again. Leo crawled over to the piano. He placed his cheek against the wooden leg of the instrument. Santiago played a chord. Leo closed his eyes, a look of pure bliss washing over his face. He could feel it. The bone conduction. His hearing was gone, but his sensitivity to vibration was supernatural. Santiago had an idea. She went to the local library and researched heavily. She found stories of deaf musicians, of percussionists who played barefoot. She realized Leo's tantrums at the diner were because of the chaotic vibrations of the cheap lighting and the heavy traffic. He was experiencing the world as a chaotic storm of physical sensation. She needed to channel it. She bought a cheap, second-hand violin from a pawn shop with her own money. She didn't tell Lucas. She didn't tell Vanessa. In the safety of the nursery, she removed the chin rest. She showed Leo how to hold it, pressing the wood directly against his collarbone and jaw. She drew the bow across the strings. Leo gasped. He didn't hear the sound. He felt the resonance rattle through his skull, a direct line to his brain. He grabbed the bow. He wasn't coordinated yet, but he was fascinated. He spent hours just drawing the bow, feeling the difference between the G string and the E string. Santiago saw the spark of intelligence. He wasn't just feeling it, he was memorizing the frequencies. He was a prodigy in waiting. But while Santiago was unlocking Leo's mind, Vanessa was plotting to lock him away. On the Friday before Santiago's deadline, a diamond bracelet went missing from Vanessa's room. Santiago was in the kitchen, making Leo's lunch, when 3 guards, led by Lucas, marched in. "Boss wants to see you," Lucas said, looking apologetic. In the main hall. Santiago wiped her hands and followed them. In the main hall, Lucas stood like a statue. Vanessa was weeping into a silk handkerchief, though her eyes were dry and triumphant. "She took it," Vanessa sobbed. "My grandmother's diamond bracelet. I saw her coming out of my room." "I haven't been in your room," Santiago said, her voice shaking but firm. "We found this in your bag," Lucas said, tossing Santiago's canvas tote onto the floor. It spilled open. Tucked inside a spare uniform was the glittering diamond bracelet. Santiago stared at it. "I didn't take that. She planted it." "Why would I plant my own jewelry?" Vanessa sneered. "Lucas, she's a grifter, a thief, and she's teaching your son to be a beggar with those hand signals. You need to fire her. Now." Lucas looked at Santiago. There was pain in his eyes. He wanted to believe her, but the evidence was physical, and in his world, trust was a weakness he couldn't afford. "Santiago," Lucas said, his voice cold, "pack your things." "Sir, please, it's a lie. Leo needs me. We made a breakthrough." "Get out!" Lucas shouted, the pressure of the war and the domestic chaos finally snapping his control. "Before I have you thrown out." Santiago looked at the stairs. Leo was standing there, watching. He didn't know what was being said, but he saw the anger. He saw Santiago crying. Leo ran down the stairs. He threw himself in front of Santiago, spreading his arms. He looked at his father, his face fierce. "Leo, move," Lucas warned. Leo shook his head. He looked at Vanessa, then pointed at her. He made a sign Santiago hadn't taught him. He pointed to Vanessa, then mimed putting something in a bag. Lucas frowned. What is he doing? He saw her, Santiago realized aloud. He saw her put it in my bag. He's lying, Vanessa snapped. He's a retard, Lucas. He doesn't know what he's doing. He is not a retard, Santiago screamed. The tension in the room was a physical weight. Lucas looked between the woman he was supposed to marry and the son he thought was broken. Get out, Santiago, Lucas repeated, though his voice lacked the fire from before. Lucas, escort her off the property. Santiago was dragged toward the door. As the heavy wood slammed shut, separating her from Leo, she heard the boy scream, a sound of pure, unadulterated heartbreak. She stood on the rain-slicked pavement of the driveway, the massive gate looming ahead. She had failed. But as she walked down the long driveway, her hand brushed against her pocket. She stopped. She still had the key to the nursery, and she had the violin hidden under the floorboards of the playroom. She wasn't leaving. Not without proving the truth. Tomorrow was the gala. The Vitiello annual ball. Half the city would be there. Vanessa was planning to announce the date of the wedding, and, Santiago suspected, the date of Leo's departure to the boarding school. Santiago looked back at the mansion. She had one chance. She had to crash the party, and she had to use the one weapon Vanessa didn't understand. She had to make the silence speak. The rain had soaked through Santiago's thin waitress uniform, chilling her to the bone, but the fire in her chest burned hotter than ever. She hid in the shadows of the massive oak trees lining the perimeter of the Vitiello estate. The gala was in full swing. Through the towering French windows of the ballroom, she could see the golden glow of chandeliers and the silhouettes of the city's elite mingling, oblivious to the cruelty happening upstairs. Santiago checked her pocket. The nursery key was cold metal against her fingers. She knew the shift rotations. Lucas, the head of security, would be in the main hall overseeing the VIP guests. The back entrance, near the kitchen scullery, was usually manned by a younger guard named Joey, who had a soft spot for texting on duty. She moved, a shadow among shadows. She slipped past the catering vans, dodging the gaze of a smoking driver, and reached the scullery door. Joey was there, leaning against the brickwork, his face illuminated by the blue light of his phone. Santiago picked up a pebble and tossed it toward the dumpster, 10 yards away. Clatter. Joey's head snapped up. He moved to investigate. Santiago didn't hesitate. She slipped behind him, quiet as a breath, and used her old keycard on the electronic lock. It beeped green. Lucas hadn't deactivated it yet. A small mercy in a cruel night. She was in. The house smelled of roasting lamb and expensive perfume. Santiago navigated the back corridors, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She had to get to the nursery. She had to get the violin. And she had to get Leo. When she reached the east wing, it was dark. The party was downstairs. The broken child was hidden away. She unlocked the nursery door and slipped inside. Leo was sitting on his bed, still wearing his tiny tuxedo. He wasn't crying. He was staring at the door, waiting. When he saw Santiago, he didn't make a sound. He scrambled off the bed and ran to her, burying his face in her wet apron. Santiago hugged him tight, smelling the baby shampoo and the faint scent of fear. She pulled back and signed, "Are you okay?" Leo nodded, then pointed to the floorboards in the corner. Violin. Santiago retrieved it. It was cheap, scratched, and missing a chin rest, but to them it was Excalibur. She tuned it quickly, feeling the vibrations in the wood to ensure the pitch was right. She handed it to Leo. "We have to go downstairs," she whispered, though he couldn't hear. She signed, "Show Papa." "Show them music." Leo looked terrified. He shook his head, signing number Vanessa angry. Santiago knelt, holding his shoulders. Vanessa lies. You speak truth. Music is truth. Leo looked at the violin, then at Santiago's fierce eyes. He nodded. They moved to the main staircase. The sounds of a string quartet floated up from the ballroom. It was polite, boring music. Mozart? Safe. Santiago and Leo stood at the top of the marble staircase. Below them, hundreds of people in tuxedos and gowns were drinking champagne. In the center of the room, on a raised dais, Lucas stood with a microphone. Vanessa was clinging to his arm, looking like a diamond-encrusted predator. I would like to thank you all for coming. Lucas's voice boomed over the speakers. Tonight is a celebration of family and unity. And, Vanessa interrupted, leaning into the mic, we have a special announcement. As many of you know, Lucas's son, Leo, has challenges. After much consideration, we have decided that for his own well-being, he will be moved to the St. Jude Institute in Switzerland next week. A murmur went through the crowd. Switzerland. It was code for exile. It is a hard choice, Vanessa feigned a wobble in her voice, but a mother does what is best. You are not his mother. The voice rang out from the top of the stairs, sharp and clear. The music stopped. Every head turned. Santiago stood there, wet, disheveled, holding Leo's hand. Santiago! Lucas stared up at her, shock registering on his face. Security! Vanessa shrieked. She's crazy! She broke in! Get her! Guards started to move up the stairs. Wait! Lucas commanded. He looked at his son. Leo wasn't hiding behind Santiago this time. He was standing in front of her, holding the violin and bow. He has something to say, Santiago shouted. Since you won't listen to his hands, listen to his soul. She nudged Leo. Play. The ballroom was silent, save for the murmurs of confusion. A violin? Someone whispered. The boy is deaf. This is a cruel joke. Leo closed his eyes. He didn't hear the whispers. He didn't hear the sneers. He felt the floor beneath his feet, the massive wooden beams of the Vitiello estate. He felt the vibration of the air conditioning unit. He felt the thumping of his own heart. He raised the cheap violin to his chin. His form was imperfect, self-taught in secret, but his grip was iron. He drew the bow. It wasn't Mozart, it wasn't Bach. It was a raw, guttural note that tore through the silence like a scream. It was a low G, played with such intensity that the resin dust flew off the strings. Lucas took a step forward, mesmerizing. Leo began to play a melody Santiago had hummed to him, a simple lullaby, but he played it with a ferocity that was terrifying. He couldn't hear the pitch, so he bent the notes, sliding between semitones, creating a sound that was haunting, discordant, and utterly beautiful. It sounded like weeping. It sounded like rage. He played the vibration. He felt the wood of the violin resonating against his collarbone, and he chased the feeling of maximum resonance. The crowd watched, spellbound. The boy swayed, his small body channeling a storm of emotion. He played faster, the tempo increasing as he remembered the fear of the dark, the pain of the silence, the sting of Vanessa's pinch. Santiago stepped up to the railing. As Leo played, she translated. She didn't use sign language. She used words, speaking over the haunting music. He says he is lonely, Santiago narrated, her voice trembling. He says the silence is loud. He says he wants his father to look at him, not through him. Leo hit a crescendo, a high, screeching note that made the crystal glasses on the trays vibrate. He says he is not broken, Santiago cried out. He says he is just waiting to be heard. Leo finished with a sharp, abrupt down bow. He stood panting, his chest heaving, his arm raised in the air. Silence. Absolute, heavy silence. Then, a slow clap. It was Don Moretti, the head of the rival family, standing near the back. He clapped once, twice. Then the rest of the room joined in. Thunderous applause filled the hall. Lucas walked up the stairs, ignoring the guests, ignoring Vanessa. He stopped in front of his son. He looked at the cheap violin, then at Leo's face. "You played that?" Lucas whispered. Leo couldn't hear him, but he saw his father's eyes. They were wet. Lucas fell to his knees. He pulled Leo into a hug, burying his face in the boy's small shoulder. "I'm sorry," Lucas choked out. "I'm so sorry, Leo." Vanessa stood at the bottom of the stairs, her face a mask of fury. She had lost the crowd. She was losing Lucas. "This is ridiculous," she shouted, her voice shrill. "It's a trick. She taught him to mimic it like a monkey. He doesn't understand music. He's a defect." Lucas stood up. He slowly turned to face Vanessa. The look on his face made the guard step back. "Don't you ever," Lucas said, his voice low and deadly, "speak about my son like that again." "Lucas, be reasonable," Vanessa stammered, realizing she had pushed too far. "I am trying to protect our image. That waitress is a thief. She stole my bracelet." "I didn't steal it," Santiago said, walking down the stairs, placing herself between Lucas and Vanessa. "Prove it," Vanessa hissed. "The bracelet was in your bag." Santiago looked at Lucas. "I can't prove I didn't take it, but I can prove who she really is." Santiago reached into her apron pocket. This was the moment. The object wasn't a weapon. It was a small, jagged piece of grey plastic. It looked like trash. "What is that?" Vanessa scoffed. "More garbage?" "It's the baby monitor from the nursery," Santiago said. "The one you smashed against the wall 3 days ago when you thought Leo was recording you. You missed a piece, and the memory card inside, it survived." Vanessa's face went pale. "I listened to it," Santiago lied. She hadn't listened to it. The plastic was actually just a broken piece of a toy car Leo had stepped on, but she needed Vanessa to panic. "I heard who you called, Vanessa. I heard you talking to the Rossi family. It was a gamble, a massive bluff based on the hushed phone calls Santiago had witnessed Vanessa taking in the garden." Vanessa's eyes darted to the exits. The guilt was written in the panic. "The Rossi family?" Lucas's voice dropped an octave. "You're conspiring with my enemies." "She's lying!" Vanessa shrieked, but she was backing away. "Lucas, she's a waitress. She knows nothing." "Check her phone," Santiago challenged. Lucas signaled Lucas. "Check her phone." "No." Vanessa tried to run, but Lucas was faster. He grabbed her arm. She struggled, clawing at him, her mask of sophistication crumbling completely. Lucas pulled the phone from her clutch and unlocked it. She was too panicked to stop the facial recognition. He scrolled for a second, then looked at Lucas. He nodded grimly. "Outgoing calls to Matteo Rossi, 5 of them in the last week." The ballroom erupted in gasps. Betrayal of this magnitude meant death in their world. "Get her out of here," Lucas commanded, turning his back on her. "Hold her in the cellar. We will deal with this later." As Vanessa was dragged away, screaming curses, Lucas looked at Santiago. "You saved us. You saved him." Santiago smiled weakly. The adrenaline was fading, leaving her dizzy. "I just listened, sir. That's all." But the night wasn't over. As the guards dragged Vanessa toward the exit, the front doors exploded inward. The ballroom, moments ago a theater of high society drama, instantly transformed into a slaughterhouse. The heavy oak doors at the main entrance didn't just open. They disintegrated, splintering inward under the force of a breaching charge. Glass shards from the French windows rained down like jagged diamonds as men clad in tactical black gear and ski masks poured into the room. They moved with military precision, their automatic rifles cutting through the air with deafening cracks. "Get down!" Lucas's roar tore through the screams of the guests. He didn't hesitate. In one fluid motion, he tackled Santiago and Leo, using his own body as a shield as the first volley of bullets chewed up the plaster wall behind them. The sheer weight of him pinned Santiago to the cold marble, the smell of expensive cologne now mixed with the acrid scent of drywall dust and cordite. "It's the Rossi hit squad," Lucas growled into her ear, his voice tight with adrenaline. They were waiting for the signal. Chaos reigned. The city's elite, politicians, models, business tycoons, scrambled like terrified rats. Tables were overturned, crystal centerpieces shattered, and the terrified wails of the crowd merged into a singular, horrific drone. Lucas rolled off them, pulling a sleek, black handgun from an ankle holster Santiago hadn't even known was there. He fired 3 shots in rapid succession, dropping the lead attacker who was advancing toward the stairs. "Lucas, secure the east flank," Lucas shouted over the din. He turned to Santiago, his eyes wild but focused. "You have to move, now." "Where?" Santiago screamed, clutching Leo. The boy was shaking violently, his eyes squeezed shut. He couldn't hear the gunshots, but the concussive vibrations of the explosions were hammering against his chest like physical blows. To him, the world wasn't just loud, it was shaking apart. "The library," Lucas ordered, firing another cover shot. "There's a panic room behind the bookcase. The code is my birthday. Go! I'll draw their fire." "Lucas, go!" he roared, shoving them toward the service corridor. Santiago grabbed Leo's hand, her grip bruising. "Run, Leo! Run!" They scrambled across the floor, slipping on a mixture of spilled champagne and blood. Bullets whizzed past them, buzzing like angry hornets. One struck a marble bust inches from Santiago's head, showering her with stone dust. She didn't look back. She focused entirely on the small hand in hers, pulling Leo through the labyrinth of the estate. They burst into the hallway, the sounds of the firefight muffling slightly behind the heavy doors. But they weren't safe yet. The library was at the end of the west wing. As they sprinted, Leo stumbled. Santiago scooped him up, her adrenaline surging, making the 5-year-old feel as light as a feather. She burst into the library, a massive room, lined with floor-to-ceiling shelves, smelling of old paper and leather. She slammed the heavy double door shut and threw the deadbolt. It was a flimsy barrier against assault rifles, but it would buy them seconds. "The book," Santiago panted, scanning the thousands of spines lining the walls. "He said the red book! Pull the red book!" She set Leo down. "Help me look. Red book!" She began frantically tearing books off the shelves near the fireplace. The Iliad. She yanked it. Nothing. War and Peace. She pulled it. Nothing happened. Boom! The library door shuddered. The wood cracked near the lock. They were coming. "Think, Santiago, think!" she cried, tears of panic blurring her vision. There were hundreds of red books. It could be any of them. The Scarlet Letter. Grimm's fairy tales. She was pulling them down by the armful, throwing them to the floor in a heap of useless literature. Leo tugged on her skirt. Santiago ignored him, reaching for a crimson encyclopedia. "Not now, Leo." Leo tugged harder, digging his nails in. Santiago looked down. Leo wasn't looking at her. He was looking at the top shelf of the section on Roman history. He pointed urgently at a thick, leather-bound volume. "That one?" Santiago gasped. "Leo, that's not red. It's maroon. It's almost black." Leo didn't lower his hand. His eyes were wide, imploring. He knew this room. He had spent hours here, alone while his father was working, observing the details no one else noticed. He had seen the wear on the spine of that specific book, the way the dust didn't settle around it like the others. The door hinges groaned. A boot kicked through the wood. Santiago trusted him. She dragged a heavy armchair over to the shelf, kicked off her shoes, and scrambled up. She stretched, her fingers barely grazing the spine of the dark maroon book Leo had pointed to. She lunged, grabbing the top of the binding, and pulled. Click! A hydraulic hiss filled the room. The entire section of the bookcase swung inward, revealing a heavy steel door and a keypad. Santiago practically fell off the chair. She grabbed Leo and threw him into the dark recess of the safe room, diving in after him. Her fingers flew across the keypad. 10:19. Lucas's birthday. The steel door began to slide shut, just as the library doors burst open. A gunman sprinted into the room, raising his rifle. He saw the closing gap and fired. Ping! 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 The bullets sparked harmlessly against the closing steel, the door sealed with a final, resonant thud, followed by the mechanical sound of locking bolts sliding into place. Silence. Heavy, pressurized silence. Santiago collapsed against the wall, sliding down to the floor. She pulled Leo into her lap, burying her face in his neck, sobbing with relief. "You found it," she whispered into his hair. "You found it, baby." The panic room was stark, illuminated by the cool blue glow of a bank of security monitors on the far wall. It was a command center, designed for exactly this scenario. Santiago wiped her eyes and looked at the screens. What she saw made her blood run cold. The monitors displayed various angles of the ballroom. The scene was dire. The Vitiello guards were falling back. The Rossi hitmen had superior positioning and firepower, and in the center of it all was Lucas. He was pinned down behind a thick marble pillar near the dais. He was reloading his weapon, his face a mask of grim determination. But the camera angle showed what Lucas couldn't see. 3 gunmen were flanking him. They were moving through the shadows of the mezzanine, positioning themselves to shoot him from above. "No," Santiago breathed, pressing her hand against the screen. "He doesn't see them." Lucas leaned out to fire, but bullets chipped the stone inches from his face, forcing him back. He was trapped. It was a matter of seconds before the men on the balcony had a clear shot at his exposed back. Santiago looked around the small steel room frantically. There has to be a phone, a radio. There was nothing. The lines must have been cut. Then her eyes landed on a touch-screen console embedded in the desk. It wasn't a communication device. It was the master control for the estate's smart home system. It controlled everything: climate, security shutters, audio, and lighting. Santiago stared at the interface. She saw the schematic for the ballroom. She looked at Leo. He was watching the screen, too. He pointed to the gunman on the balcony, then made a slashing motion across his throat. He understood the danger. Santiago looked at the lighting controls. She remembered the diner. She remembered how sensitive Leo was to the flickering fluorescent lights, how the strobe effect disoriented him, making him dizzy and sick. She looked at the Rossi gunmen on the screen. They were wearing night vision goggles to navigate the smoky, dim room. An idea, desperate and dangerous, formed in her mind. "Leo," she signed, her hands shaking. "Cover your eyes. Tight." Leo obeyed instantly, pressing his palms against his eyelids. Santiago turned back to the console. She didn't just want to turn the lights on. She wanted to weaponize them. She found the event mode settings. She selected strobe, max frequency. Then she saw another tab, fire suppression. The ballroom didn't use water sprinklers, which would ruin the antique paintings. It used a halon gas displacement system. "Hold on, Lucas," she whispered. She smashed her finger onto the execute button for the strobes. On the monitor, the ballroom instantly turned into a seizure-inducing nightmare. The massive crystal chandeliers flashed on and off at a blinding speed. The effect on the gunmen was immediate. The intense strobing flared out their night vision goggles, blinding them with white-hot light. They ripped the goggles off, stumbling, disoriented by the rapid shift in contrast. Santiago didn't stop there. She hit deploy, halon gas. Massive vents in the ballroom ceiling hissed open. A thick, white fog cascaded down like a waterfall, filling the room in seconds. The Rossi gunmen were panicked now. They couldn't see. They were firing blindly into the mist, their coordination shattered. But Lucas knew this house. He knew every inch of the floor plan. On the screen, Santiago watched as Lucas utilized the chaos. He didn't flinch. He dropped low to the floor where the gas was thinner. He moved like a phantom. He rolled out from behind the pillar. The gunman on the balcony, blinded and coughing, never saw him. Lucas fired. The man fell. Lucas pivoted. He saw the shadows of the other two attackers struggling in the strobe-lit fog. He moved with lethal precision. Bang! Bang! The threats were neutralized. "You cleared the room," Santiago whispered, tears streaming down her face again. The tide had turned. The surviving Vitiello guards, rallying behind their boss and using the confusion to their advantage, pushed the remaining attackers back toward the exit. Santiago watched until the last Rossi gunman fell or fled. She watched as the strobes finally timed out, leaving the room bathed in the eerie white mist of the gas. She sat there for what felt like hours, though it was likely only minutes. She held Leo, rocking him back and forth. Eventually, the keypad on the door beeped. Santiago stiffened, pulling Leo behind her. Had they breached the code? The heavy steel bolts retracted. The door hissed open. Lucas stood there. He looked like he had walked through hell. His tuxedo was shredded, covered in white dust and plaster. Blood dripped from a nasty graze on his cheek, staining his collar. He was breathing hard, his chest heaving, but his eyes were clear, and they were fixed on her. He dropped his gun on the desk and fell to his knees, not out of weakness, but out of an overwhelming need to be on their level. "Santiago!" he choked out. He wrapped his arms around both of them, pulling them into a crushingly tight embrace. He smelled of smoke and violence, but his warmth was the most reassuring thing Santiago had ever felt. She could feel his heart hammering against her own, a frantic, powerful rhythm. "You cleared the room," Lucas breathed into the crook of her neck, his voice trembling. "The lights, the gas. That was you?" Santiago pulled back just enough to look at him, her hands trembling as she cupped his battered face. "Leo saw the book," she said, her voice cracking. "And we remembered the diner. We did it together." Lucas looked at his son. Leo uncovered his eyes and looked at his father. He reached out and touched the cut on Lucas's cheek, his face etched with concern. Lucas closed his eyes, leaning into his son's small hand. When he opened them again, he looked at Santiago with an intensity that burned hotter than the strobe lights. "You stayed," he said, sounding almost bewildered. "The door was open. You could have run out the back. You could have left us to rot." "I couldn't leave him," Santiago said fiercely, smoothing Leo's hair. "I promised him I'd listen. I promised I wouldn't leave." Lucas took Santiago's hand. He brought it to his lips, kissing her knuckles, pressing his mouth against the fading bruise on her wrist. "You will never have to run again," Lucas vowed, the promise vibrating through his voice like a low note on a cello. "And neither will he. I swear it on my life." The newspapers called it the Gala Massacre, a sensational headline that kept the city buzzing for weeks. The aftermath was swift and brutal, but necessary. The Rossi family was systematically dismantled, their territories absorbed into the Vitiello Empire with a ruthless efficiency that served as a warning to anyone else who dared to threaten Lucas's blood. Vanessa vanished from the social pages entirely. Rumors swirled that she was hidden away in a convent in Sicily, while darker whispers suggested she was somewhere much colder. But in the Vitiello estate, her name was never spoken again. She was a ghost of a painful past, exorcised by the truth. The most profound change, however, wasn't in the criminal underworld. It was within the marble walls of the estate itself. 3 months had passed since the gunfire ceased, and the oppressive, museum-like silence that once suffocated the house was gone. It had been replaced by the chaotic, beautiful sounds of life. Santiago stood on the stone terrace overlooking the sprawling back gardens. The spring air was crisp, carrying the scent of blooming jasmine. Below her, on the manicured lawn, a transformation was taking place. Leo was sitting cross-legged on a picnic blanket across from a young woman, Sarah, a specialized tutor Santiago had interviewed herself. Sarah was deaf, and she was teaching Leo American Sign Language with a patience that bordered on saintly. But Leo wasn't the only student. Lucas Vitiello, the man whose hands were stained with the blood of his enemies, was sitting on the grass in his dress shirt and slacks. His jacket was discarded on a nearby chair, his sleeves rolled up to his elbows. He was frowning in intense concentration, his brow furrowed, as he tried to mimic the tutor's movements. Sarah signed butterfly. She linked her thumbs and fluttered her fingers. Leo copied her instantly, his movements fluid and natural. He laughed, a bright, uninhibited sound that rose up to the terrace and warmed Santiago's chest. He then turned to his father, waiting. Lucas's large, scarred hands moved clumsily. He linked his thumbs, but his fingers were stiff. Leo shook his head, giggling. He reached out, grabbing his father's hands, and gently adjusted the angle of Lucas's fingers. Lucas looked down at his son. There was no impatience in his eyes, only a profound, aching love. He let the boy guide him, surrendering control in a way the Don never did. When Leo gave him a thumbs up, Lucas smiled, a genuine, relaxed expression that took 10 years of stress off his face. He looked up then, sensing eyes on him. He found Santiago on the terrace. "He's learning fast," Lucas called out, his voice carrying easily over the distance. He stood up, brushing grass blades from his trousers, and walked up the stone steps to join her. "Faster than me. My hands are too old for this." "You're doing okay for an old man," Santiago teased, handing him a glass of iced tea as he reached the balustrade. Lucas took the glass but didn't drink. He watched her, his dark eyes tracing the curve of her face. The bruises on her sole, much like the ones on her wrist, were fading. She wasn't wearing a maid's uniform anymore. She wore a soft blue sundress that moved with the breeze, looking every bit the lady of the manor, yet she still carried that fierce, protective edge that had saved them all. "I have a proposal for you," Lucas said, his tone shifting. The playfulness vanished, replaced by the solemn intensity he used when making business deals that decided the fate of the city. Santiago leaned against the railing, raising an eyebrow. "I'm already paid well, Lucas, and the benefits are exceptional." "Not that kind of proposal." Lucas set the glass down on the stone ledge. He reached into his pocket. Santiago's breath hitched. She expected a business card, or perhaps a key to a new car. Instead, he pulled out a ring. It wasn't a modern, flashy rock like the diamond Vanessa had paraded around. This was an antique, heavy with history. It was intricate gold filigree, holding a deep, dark blue sapphire that caught the sunlight like a piece of the ocean. "My grandmother's," Lucas said softly. "She was the only person who ever understood me. Until you." Santiago stared at the ring, her heart hammering a rhythm against her ribs. "Lucas, you didn't just save my son," Lucas continued, taking her hand. His skin was rough against hers, but his touch was incredibly gentle. "You saved my life," You brought the truth into this house when all we had were lies. You looked at my boy and saw a symphony when the rest of the world saw broken silence. He paused, his thumb brushing over her knuckles, right over the spot where the landlord had grabbed her months ago, a memory that felt like a lifetime away. Be my wife, Santiago. Be Leo's mother. For real. Let me spend the rest of my life protecting you the way you protected him. Santiago looked past him to the garden. Leo had finished his lesson. He was running in circles, chasing a real butterfly, his face turned up toward the sun. He looked back, saw them, and stopped. He grinned, raising his hands to sign family. Santiago looked back at the most feared man in the city, seeing only the vulnerable heart he had entrusted to her. Tears pricked her eyes, blurring the gold of the ring. "Okay," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Lucas let out a breath he seemed to have been holding since the gala. He slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting in the dark for her all along. "But," Santiago added, wiping a tear from her cheek, "one condition." Lucas pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her waist. "Anything. Name it. A private island, a chateau in France. I'll give you the world, Santiago." Santiago laughed, resting her hands on his chest. "No, I don't want an island. I want you to buy the rusty spoon." Lucas blinked, taken aback. "The diner? The place with the grease stains and the rats?" "Yes," Santiago said firmly. "I want you to buy it." "Why?" "Because the pancakes are terrible," Santiago said, a mischievous light in her eyes. She leaned up, her lips brushing against his. "And I think the new owner should fix the lighting. It buzzes. It hurts the customers who feel the world too deeply." Lucas stared at her for a second before throwing his head back and laughing. It was a deep, rich sound that echoed off the stone walls, a sound of pure liberation. "Done," he promised, pulling her into a searing kiss. "The rusty spoon is yours. We'll turn it into a music school, or a sanctuary, whatever you want." For the first time in the history of the Vitiello estate, the house wasn't a fortress of solitude. It was a home. Down in the grass, Leo picked up his cheap, battered violin. He didn't need to play it perfectly. He just liked the way the wood hummed against his collarbone, a secret language between him and the universe. He drew the bow across the strings, sending a single clear, resonant note into the air. It wasn't a cry for help anymore. It was a declaration. It was a note that said, finally, he was heard. And he was home. Santiago didn't just save a boy, she healed a broken lineage. By looking past the label of defect, she found a prodigy, and by challenging a tyrant, she found a king who needed a queen. In a world of loud noises and empty threats, Santiago proved that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply listen to the silence. If this story touched your heart, please smash that like button and subscribe to the channel. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that everyone deserves to be heard. Turn on notifications so you never miss the next dramatic chapter.